Chief Poulin, Chief Wilking, and Judy Rowan. So whoever's talking, I'll just switch back and forth on my phone screen.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted you to be sure who was in the meeting. Judy just joined as well. All right. So let's, hi, Judy.
Hi.
So let's get started. Let's, let me read the disclosure there about the pandemic. Good evening or good afternoon. As chair of the Facility Advisory Committee, I am declaring that an emergency exists and I am invoking the provisions of RSA 91-A:2-3B. Federal, state, and local officials have determined that gatherings of 10 or more people pose a substantial risk to our community in its continuing efforts to combat the spread of COVID-19. In concurring with their determination, I also find that this meeting is imperative to the continued operation of town government and services which are vital to public safety and confidence during this emergency. As such, this meeting will be conducted without a quorum of this body physically present in the same location. At this time, I also welcome members of the public accessing this meeting remotely. Even though this meeting is being conducted in a unique manner under unusual circumstances, the usual rules of conduct and decorum apply. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their name, also please state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting. So we'll start with Amanda. Amanda Kelly.
Amanda Kelly, present and alone.
And Peter Lennon. Oops, looks like Peter might have dropped off. Well, this is Chris Weeks. I'm here and I'm alone as well. And we'll give Peter just a minute to come back on. If he is unable to, I'm not quite sure what we do with this. If we don't have a quorum. I mean, Amanda, you and I and the rest of the gang, we could still work through the RFP. We could still get people's comments on that and get that moving.
As long as we don't vote on anything, would that be acceptable? Okay, perfect.
Is it? Okay, thank you,
Thanks, Melissa.
Oh, Peter's back. Peter, we're taking attendance.
Peter can come in and out.
Well, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm really tired.
Did I miss something? Sorry, I had to back out for a sec.
Just a roll call.
I'm here and alone in the car.
Okay. And as I said, Rob and Mark are unable to make it due to other commitments. So the agenda, the first thing we'll do is we'll just approve the minutes from the last meeting, and then we'll jump into the RFP outline stuff, which is the reason a few of the folks are here, like the Chiefs and Judy. So we'll try to do that early on, and then when we're done with that, you folks are welcome to move on. So first of all, Peter and Amanda, did either of you have comments on the meetings, the minutes from the last meeting?
Nope.
I had just two minor edits.
Go for it.
On the second page under number 3, in the 12th line, it says, starts with the word list, but PL suggested that the draft, even though the whole section's on the RFP, if we could put the word RFP before the word draft.
Okay.
And then on the last page, under old business, under congratulations, thank you very much. It's a trustee of the trust funds. So there's another word.
Okay.
And I move those minutes be approved as amended.
And I second. So I have no comments either. So Amanda, do you have any?
No comments, and okay. I vote yay.
Okay, so yeah, we'll take the vote. Amanda, do you approve the minutes as amended by Peter?
Yes.
Yes. Peter, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So we'll accept the minutes with those revisions. All right, so now let's move on to the RFP, the request for proposal for the public safety complex. Last meeting, we had a pretty good discussion on that. I think it was good to have Judy and Bob and Corey there to discuss it, and Chief Poulin was there as well. Looks like Dave is not here today, which is too bad because this is something that he will be taking and listing and soliciting the consultant proposals. But, oh, yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
So Dave is actually out sick today, and he and I had some conversations, and he had a proposal for today of various options and things to discuss. So I don't know if you guys, I know I hate to ask you to wait, but we had some conversations with the chief, both chiefs, excuse me. So,
Okay.
just to let you know, I'm sure he will join us the next time to review those.
Yeah. So what are you saying, Melissa, that he had, so he has some more information, or you and he both have more info and more options?
So I'm just saying, I think he's a great person to have here during this discussion. We can certainly start the discussion, but I hope that we can continue it to another meeting before it gets finalized. We had talked about sort of the 4 different options and doing an RFQ versus an RFP, and, what the scope is not the right word because scope delineates a little bit more detail, but just sort of some of the options and alternatives that we thought would be good to discuss with you guys.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And yeah, it would be good if we had Mark and Rob here too, to weigh in on that stuff. So as much as I would have liked to have finished it off today, yeah, I guess it'll extend from today into another meeting.
And again, so sorry about that. He's just not feeling well today.
Yeah,
so.
That happens. Life happens to all of us. So
I have a
first
question.
thing, go right ahead, Judy.
What is an RFQ as opposed to RFP? Sorry, I'm not in the know on these things.
Yeah, RFQ, I'll give my shot, and then Melissa can follow up with exactly what Exeter does for it too. RFP is a request for a proposal, so that would be where a firm they'll propose something based on a scope of work, a specific scope of work, whereas an RFQ is a request for qualifications. So rather than them proposing based on a specific project, they just submit their qualifications relative to a particular job that we're looking to do. And Melissa, feel free to chime in too.
Nope, that's exactly correct. And Dave had wanted to discuss that with you folks and why he felt that the RFQ might have fit this situation a little bit better.
Okay. And RFQs are usually independent of pricing too.
So that was part of it because he wanted to be able to work with the person or the firm and have a little bit more wiggle room on being able to either scale up or scale back within a certain budget as you guys are moving through and determining what the needs were.
Yeah, no, that's not a bad idea. I like that.
If I could, I don't know, on my phone, I don't have a hand raised. So
just chime in. We're pretty informal here, Peter.
Thank you. I might suggest to Melissa that before our next meeting and our discussion with all the things that you and Dave and the chiefs have talked about, if there's something we can have, whether it's a draft or an outline or something that we can have in advance so that we at least have had a chance to read that and see what our questions might or might not be before we actually get into it at the meeting, that would be really helpful.
Absolutely. And it's actually all done and we were ready to share it. I just don't want to share it without talking with him first, if that's okay. But yeah, actually, probably as long as he's back in tomorrow, we can probably share it tomorrow for you. So that's not a problem.
Great. Thank you.
So,
of course.
Continued question from those outside this field. Why would you want an RFQ as opposed to RFP?
So in an RFQ, we would solicit firms to submit their qualifications. They wouldn't be submitting a price or anything, but we could just pick the firm that we thought was the most qualified and that we thought understood us the best and would work the best with us on this project. And then after we chose them, we could enter negotiations and come up with a contract, and in that contract would be the scope of what they would work on. So, and we could negotiate with them after we selected them. Rather than having them, if they do an RFP, they'll just say, okay, we put out a scope of work. They come back with how much they're willing to do it for. You know, they'll bid on the job. As part of the package, we'll solicit past projects that are applicable to this one. And then we would select them basically based on price. So I think this way, there's pros and cons to both ways. So if we did the RFQ, it might not be a bad way to go in the sense that we have the firm lined up first, and then we can negotiate with them to get the scope that we want for the price that we want. And then if we need to, we can adjust the scope as we move along. So one of the first things I was going to do, Judy, especially along the lines of people outside the firm, is last time we talked about the RFP, the scope, and even regardless of which contract method we use, whether it's an RFQ or an RFP, we are going to have to give them a scope at some point to work on. So the RFP, I think, is still a good foundation for us to figure out what kind of work we can do internally to give to a consultant once they're on board. So I still think it's worthwhile to step through the RFP and maybe try to highlight some things that we think we can do, or what do we need the consultant to do. And we'll continue to move that forward. And then at the next meeting, hopefully we'll have a larger contingent of people to kind of polish it off and then go from there. I know Bob Kelly, his sentiment last time is we're not in a rush to do this. Melissa and Daryl, you guys may feel the same, that we're not in a rush. I'm not in a rush either, but I'd like to get it off of our plates. We can develop it to a point and hand it off to the town to take it from there. And then it'll be up to you folks to decide the time frame for when you want to post it and start soliciting consultants. So,
although there is a little bit of a timeline consideration, and that is the later and longer it takes for us to get this on the street, and the longer it takes for the consultants to either respond with an RFQ or to the RFP, that, budget planning for the next step may slide. Because if we don't get the results soon enough to be able to inform next fiscal year's budget deliberations, then we just have to wait till the fiscal year after that, which may be good or may be bad, depending on what the preferred option comes out at and what it might or might not cost. So the only real time pressure is based on when we think we want the consultant's work to be done to inform how the budget committee and the facilities committee and obviously the town, the chiefs and the town staff and Melissa, which fiscal year do they want to put what amount of money? Answer that question.
And so, Peter, that's exactly some of the conversations that we're having right now with the chiefs and some of the town staff. So I wouldn't say that we're not in a rush, but we're more in doing a little bit of pre-planning on exactly what Peter's saying. So we will circle back, and keep everybody in the loop as we kind of go through those conversations, and those are happening right now.
Great. I would urge you to hopefully not start pouring the concrete until you've had a chance to informally or formally discuss it with both the facilities committee and forgive me, Judy, for speaking but certainly also the budget recommendations committee.
That's sort of, I guess that is what we hope to do. Yes.
Right.
If I could just jump in, I think the feeling is that there isn't a sense of time pressure, and that in fact we spend our money more wisely when there's careful planning. And I would hope that we would take our time. This is going to be an important renovation, building, 2 buildings, whatever the final solution is, the more carefully it's thought through, the more effective the final result will be in solving the particular department's problems, and also the better use of taxpayer funds. I'd also say that we have a lot on the debt service already. And I don't know what difference the Build Back Better will mean at all to us, if it'll amount to anything. But let's hope there'll be some money to help us out with a project of this size.
Yeah, I agree, Judy. And as far as timing is concerned, I really have a hard time seeing us being able to get through a feasibility study completed, one that everybody is happy with and has gotten some good feedback from the town. I have a hard time seeing us getting that done before the end of this year. So I guess I would think it would be hard to get this into the next fiscal year's budget.
Yeah. Also keeping in mind the town vote on this particular funding mechanism was barely passed. Voters are going to have a lot of apprehension about this project unless we can follow a procedure that is very thoughtful and problem focused. We saw it happen with the library, that the more specifically tied to solutions of problems it seemed, the happier townspeople were to vote for a renovation or building change.
I would agree with everything you all have said, and I don't mean this caveat to be as dire as it might sound, but if we truly cannot make next fiscal year's budget, then I would hope the town wouldn't use that as an opportunity to try to shove some other major project in the budget, because there's now a fiscal 23 hole for what might have been the public safety center or whatever facilities options come about, because we're still going to deal with, whether we do it this year or next year or the year after that, we're still going to be dealing with what the budget committee's chart and timeline and debt obligations projections are. And so it doesn't relieve the pressure on us and the town to make choices about priorities in terms of which projects are more important and which projects shouldn't be allowed to threaten by their very existence other more important projects. So we're going to have to, whenever this comes about, make decisions about, certainly in my case, I can tell you right now, the police and fire project is more important than any other project that's coming down the line.
Except
and I would not
water
want
sewer projects, which must happen.
I understand that. Well, we can agree to disagree. But from my personal perspective, I don't want anything to get in the way of the funding for the police and fire department project. So I would just throw that idea out to Melissa to, when she considers what's going to be in the CIP, that there not be any large project which by its existence over multiple years could threaten the funding of the police and fire department budget. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Noted.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, at the last meeting we had discussed and with Bob and Corey and Judy as far as seeing some sort of layout of big capital projects over the next 10 years. And I think that was forthcoming. So and I'm sure it's still being worked on. So that's something we'll keep our eye on and we'll look forward to seeing that when it comes out. All right, so back to the RFP. So one of the things, the first thing I wanted to do with the RFP is when I looked at it again and I talked with Peter about it recently, I realized that it might not be as clear to non-building industry type people exactly what's going on. So I just wanted to step through it quickly and kind of identify what each step is and what the outcome is.
Oh, bless your heart.
So I just want everybody to understand what it is. There is some jargon and industry phraseology in here that everybody might not be completely aware of. So let me share Peter's markup. Where do I share these? I can't find the screen share thing on here.
It's on the bottom in the green button. Does it say?
It's right in the middle. Duh. Okay, thank you. Okay. So in a second, you should see the RFP outline. So step one is the program review. Can you all see that at this point?
Can you zoom in?
Oh, yeah, I'll zoom in,
Thanks.
sure.
Especially, I have to make it extra small so I can see the notes.
Yes. Is that better?
Oh, great.
Okay, so step one was the program review. And in the building trade, the big outcome of this is where we work with the chiefs in the town and everybody in the departments to determine what spaces we're going to need. Like we start with the amount of staff and the amount of equipment, and then the consultant will go through and generate a list of all the spaces that are required for each of these. So what comes out of this is we'll get an overall square footage amount for what the building should be, whether it's it's irrespective of whether it's a renovation or a new building. It is just the amount of space that they would need going forward to do their business adequately. So at this stage, we would identify all the spaces, and then we'd put some square footages to that. And so we would come out of this with rough building sizes that we could move forward with. So does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's the big outcome of that one is the space planning and how much square footage are we going to need. Second one is pretty self-explanatory. It's not so much as the building, it's the site itself. So typically there's, you survey the site so you know exactly where the boundaries are. You do some geotech evaluation where you'll hire a geotechnical company to come in and do some borings, they'll drill down into the ground, 20, 30, 40 feet, identify the types of soils that are on the site. And from there you can start to design your foundation. That'll give you an idea of what kind of foundations you'll need, whether it's just a regular spread footing or do you need to do some piles if it's not very stable soil, you might need to do piles down to bedrock, etc. Zoning reviews, obviously you have to review each site's zoning against whatever the neighborhood is zoned for and what we're trying to do in there. Same thing with the planning review. And then the infrastructure is just kind of identifying where all of these needed utilities will be coming onto the site. Where's the availability? Is there town water and town sewer or not? Is there electric nearby? Telecom and fiber optic is something. I don't know if we have any fiber optic in Exeter. That's something I run into where I work. Like we need to run fiber optics to our schools. So I don't know. Do you know, Melissa, if there's fiber optic in town?
We do. We have it in a few locations. I know the Park and Rec building has it, and I believe, a few other places. I don't think it's universal, but we do have it in a bunch of places. Yep. Yeah,
that would be something that we'll want going to both of the new stations, I would assume. And then the last one is hardness, resilience. That can be mainly, how susceptible is it to natural disaster, whether it's a flood or something like that, and how secure is the site versus instances like that. So the site evaluation is pretty straightforward. And that's something that consultants usually do too. They might have to hire, whether it's a surveyor or a geotech company, to do the borings. But otherwise, the rest of the stuff is researched by the consultant. And the last one, so the program documentation in 3A, I guess that would be the results of step 1, where we have the space planning. I think Rob added a note about sustainable features. I wouldn't worry too much about that yet. 3B is the existing conditions evaluation. So that's just what do we have now? What's good about it? What needs to be improved? What doesn't work? And then C would be the outcome of this whole process, which would be a feasibility study. And this would probably happen in at least 2 to 3 phases, where we would start out with maybe 3 potential building and site options, vet those with the public, and then start to whittle it down to 2 and ultimately a 1 preferred option. And to get to this point too, in the feasibility study, I envision us not doing like a detailed building plan, but we'll have the space planning from the programming. We'll be able to do a rough plan on different sites as needed, whether it's a new building or a renovation, just to give enough information to a cost estimator so that they can come up with a rough cost estimate for each of the options that we are researching. So I don't think there would be a ton of plan development at this point, mainly just floor plans and maybe a little planning to see whether it be like a 2 or 3 story building or a 1 or 2 story building, just enough so that we could do an initial cost estimate. And, I'm really thinking that we can use those cost estimates to set a project budget as well.
Okay, and part of this review would include information from the CPSM, the Public Safety Study, that identified particular problems within each department, the facility related statements.
Yeah, I guess, exactly. Yeah, so once we get into this section here, and even the previous section too, the site evaluation, this is definitely something where the town and the chiefs will have full input. None of these phases really move forward until we're happy and sign off on it as well. So I don't envision a scenario where a consultant is running roughshod over the town, just giving us one plan and saying, this is what you should do. They don't move forward at any of these stages until we, speaking for the town and for Dave and Melissa and budget committee and us, saying, yes, we're happy with that and we'll allow you to move forward. So throughout this, Judy, we're the ones supplying the information and we're the gatekeepers for moving to the next step. Okay. Part of the process we see would be some community participation. Like I said, once we come up with some initial options, we review those with the public. And then as we whittled it down, we would also review probably our preferred option with the public as well. It would be nice to see like a project website so people could see the latest information as we have it. And that could also be a way for the public to ask questions. They could submit them through the website and then we can answer them as we get them. And one of the keys to this will be an independent cost estimate. So I don't have a ton of faith that architectural firms on their own are very good at cost estimating. So one of the things I'd really like to see with this is whoever we pick, I want them to have an independent cost estimator on their team to evaluate our options for us. I know it's not going to be perfect. Their estimates, that isn't going to be exactly what the cost of the project is, but it's not going to be too bad. And like I said, maybe it can be a way for us to set a project budget. So when we do get into real design and construction, we have a cap limit to what we're willing to spend.
And then we'll also have a process from the budget side looking at the debt service carried forward, the projects. Apparently there have been some large ones that water sewer has had foisted off on them that's going to skew the next budget round. So we will have an idea of what the town could afford. So there would be a town budget that would then figure into whether the cost estimates, whether the project envisioned and the cost estimates could be realized by this town.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Judy. And yes, based on what you determine as far as what could be a budget for the project, if these estimates from the feasibility study are higher than that, then we can re-enter the discussions. What can we do? What do we need to pull out of the project then to make this work? So, yeah, it can be an iterative process like that to get to the number that you think we can afford.
And Chris, when I reviewed this earlier, this seems like a lot of work for $100,000. Is that the feeling of you folks as well? I'm not quite feeling like we be able to do all of these things, and how many sites we're talking about coming up with some of this information. It seems like we may not get it. And I know that you guys kind of had some of those conversations, right? I think you guys were proposing 150,000, budget proposed 100,000. So what is the plan to sort of get what we need for what we have?
Right. Yeah. Our plan initially, when we came up with this RFP, was to have all of this work done by a consultant. It would be informed by us, the town, but it would be done by a consultant. And we estimated 150,000 to 200,000 for this. And we did have those discussions. And Dave he checked with some of his firms that he's worked with, and they concurred that was probably the price range for this scope of work. So that's why we're here now, Melissa. We were going to try to step through and see what we can pull out of this for us to do versus a consultant, and try to get something down to that $100,000 number.
So one question that I have is, when we're talking about, and this is a little bit about what Dave and I and the chiefs were chatting about, the sort of alternative sites, options, that kind of thing. Can you run me through, and I apologize, my computer's being a little weird. Can you run me through a little bit of your ideas? Because I think if we can hone in some of the options, that's going to be a good place to start, at least. But I don't know, if that's what you're looking, I don't know if I'm explaining myself right, but are you looking for 3, 4, 5 sites? Are you looking for 1 or 2 sites with 2 different options? Like what are you guys thinking right now?
To be honest, I wasn't thinking anything on that.
Okay.
One of the first parts of this outline would be to have a meeting to identify potential sites and talk about what those options could be.
Okay.
So we haven't had any discussions like that. I have no clue yet what that would be. And we're purposefully, too, we don't want to move too quickly onto something, because if we kind of hone in on one aspect that seems to make sense, you could be cutting yourself off from another option that works better than that and maybe more cheaply or more efficiently. So I think we need to give good thought to a few different options, but that's a meeting that would happen after this.
I wonder if something the town could actually do a lot of work on. The chiefs know the territory as opposed to an outside consultant. They already have some feelings about some of the options. The public safety study had considered several options, made no particular recommendation, but did have comments on several locations in general, not specific. Is that something that we as a town could flesh out more fully, so we're not having independent consultants do that?
Yeah, as far as informing independent consultants, like where potential sites are, that's information I think we need to give to them because, yeah, they're not from here. They don't know what sites are available.
Yeah, they may not be aware of the importance of the railroad track, for example.
Right. Yeah. So that's something that we weren't anticipating the consultants would do as far as identify the sites. That's something we'll have to give to them. I just want to make sure their hands are not tied saying, oh, we really like this site for this reason. We want them to evaluate the sites that we present to them on an equal basis so that we can really assess them objectively and come up with the best one.
Yeah.
And Dave did start that, so that, okay. we'll get that to you. In regards to the program, that was something that both Chiefs and Dave have started to put together. And correct me, Chiefs, I know you guys did a few tours of some of the local, a few local facilities, or was that just Dave? I thought you guys were with him on one or two of them.
We have not yet toured any facility. We have 3 or 4 in mind. We have simply reached out to the communities that are beginning some projects, some local to us and some farther away, that we can kind of glean some of today's real time, what the architects are designing in space. So that, we kind of have a good idea going in, but we do have a couple of spots in mind to kind of look at what's been built in the last 5 years for space needs for fire stations and things like that. But they haven't happened yet.
So I think, we can certainly get a lot of that information to you folks. But I do think it wouldn't be bad to have a consultant just take a look at the final project or the final proposals for the program to make sure we're not missing something, and just kind of give it a once over. But yes, we have already started the process of putting all of that together for you guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was the note on there in red. That's Peter's note. And as far as having the town staff do the program review, and I agree to a point. We can do it to a point, but then there is a point where the consultants will need to do the final determination. There are code requirements that we're not aware of. Design of police and fire stations is a more specialized area. I'm not a police or fire department designer, so there's things that there's a lot, especially on the police side. There's a lot going into it with the sally ports and the holding areas, and do we want like a training range and things like that. So there are things that we're going to rely on a consultant who is experienced in this field to tell us what we will need. That police report, the police and fire reports that we have go a long ways towards that, but they don't cover everything. And there's some things like data rooms. We don't have a clue what we need for a data room. The one at the fire department now I can't believe that thing is still operational.
Nor can we.
Yeah. So, what size data room do we need, and how do we set that up? That's something we need a consultant to tell us. So yeah, we can definitely do programming to a point, between the chiefs and Dave and Melissa. Yeah, absolutely. But just know that we do need someone to make sure that we're not running afoul of any building codes and Yeah. And like the chief said, when you go look at new facilities, there might be rooms and things that they're developing now that we'll want to incorporate. So there might be new ways of working that they want to pursue that we'll want to include as well that we just don't know about yet. And either the chiefs can find that out on their tours, or maybe an experienced designer will be able to tell us more about those. So, where would
we, in this process, indicate that, contrary to past experience, the town of Exeter would like to have facilities that allow for both genders to work, be housed comfortably in the new facilities, whatever they may be?
I mean, that's something we can tell them. I suspect that that's probably the trend, Judy, for how new facilities are being built. I assume they're trying to attract, a more diverse workforce.
Just want to make sure that they know it's a priority. I know both of the chiefs are committed to this, have been working on it, and we want to make sure that it's just part of the planning process from the outset.
Yes. Yeah. We'll have to include that in the materials that we provide to whoever the consultant is. We'll make sure that's clear. And I suspect, especially in the Northeast, I'm going to guess that the trends really support that as far as designing new facilities. I'm guessing.
And I can tell you already in the program documents that that's noted. Both female and male bunk and locker rooms and all of those things to make sure that that is acceptable. But we will continue on that path for sure.
Thank you.
Will the program review that's going to be done primarily, or at least initially, by the chiefs and the town staff, is that going to make certain assumptions about locations and sites? Or
It shouldn't, Peter. It should just be, we want space to do this. And it's irrespective of site.
Well, I want to make sure of that.
Okay, I'll let them speak for themselves.
I want to make sure, and here's the reason. I don't think that the town or the voters should necessarily be confronted with the same choices they've been confronted with in the last few years in terms of what kind of police and fire facilities. So if the program review, for example, is geared toward a specific location that happens to be town-owned, then I would be a little bit concerned that would unnecessarily and inadvertently prejudice the outcome of the ultimate decisions on what kinds of facilities to build and where to build them. So I want to make sure that when the program review is done, it truly is independent of location.
I sort of feel like
the chiefs,
Peter. I think that we've talked about a lot that we're concerned that the location should be part of the public part, and not letting that be something that gets in the way later because the location got chosen too fast or assumed into a plan and then it didn't actually get the due that it should get. I don't think that we ever intended to say that the consultant was going to choose a location, but just that we would spend a good amount of time looking at different locations up front and not having it get lost. So I just want to make that addition.
So some of the most important decisions to be made in this whole process are location, and then do we have 1, 2 buildings? Those are huge decisions that need really careful thought and as much input as possible, I think.
And
jump here real quick. I sorry to interrupt. So to Peter's end, I have begun a detailed program assessment of the fire department following the some of the recommendations in the CPSM study, and just to kind of make sure I'm moving in the right direction. I don't want to work this thing twice. To Peter's end, what I'm trying to do is do a side-by-side comparison of where we are today and making some planning assumptions that this building that we're going to spend good money for, or renovations, we want to last for 25, 35, 40 years. That's what this building has already served the town well. And all I'm doing today is outlining where we are today, where we feel we'll be if we follow some recommendations of the CPSM study, i.e. personnel or equipment, and outlining what the current facility offers, and then leaving it open from there as far as, I don't even want to guess necessary space, let alone the necessary location. So I want to make sure an architect or firm understands what we have and what we need, but they can determine through a process of their programming and their experience what an appropriate space would need or location would need. So I hope that's going to meet the needs of the facility committee, and I hope to have that completed next week. So perhaps with David's outline that Melissa spoke of earlier and this, perhaps we can get you some advance notice and let you kind of weigh in on that. Does that sound, Peter, like the direction you'd like to see? Where'd Heldy go?
Yeah, I won't speak for Peter, Chief, but yes, I mean that's what you're doing, a typical programming exercise. So that's what I expect.
Perfect.
Yeah, and from what we've all talked about and seen, I just want to say real quick, the programming list, like Peter said, has nothing to do with a location, a building, square footage, nothing. It is programming needs exactly what she said. You know, what would serve the community going forward, and then exactly what Eric said, and that's the next step, that then we take that to a consultant and say, these are what we'd like. Is this feasible for our size community, and what would that look like? What size would that look like? Where can we move those pieces? So to Peter's point, there isn't well, if we go to Epping Road, we're doing X. If we stay here, we're doing X. That's not what we're doing.
Great. I missed part of that. I'm sorry.
I think
you're going to stop driving through Stratham, Peter.
Well, I'm so glad to hear your input, Chief. I think
and what Chris has said, that sounds fairly good. Here's just to give you an example. I don't know whether ultimately the solution to Exeter's police and fire facilities problems includes a police station on Epping Road or anywhere else which has a 3-bay fire station connected to it. It might, but it also might not. And so I don't want inadvertently to back into a preferred site based on a program which makes an assumption about having 3 bays of a fire substation, if you will, in the police station, wherever it is. So I'm not saying we should be against that. I don't even know what it would depend on the consultant to perhaps give us options for what we build on Epping Road, if that's the site. But I just don't want to inadvertently, serve up to the town what the town clearly hasn't been willing to buy before.
Yes.
It might be now willing to do that based on the CPMS study, based on all the good work that's going to be done by the town staff and by us and by the Budget Recommendations Committee and by the consultant. I mean, the town might decide, yes, okay, finally we really understand the issues, and you do that. But it also might not. They might make a judgment that says, sorry, it's still too expensive. And I just don't want to inadvertently get into that position. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep, noted. No, I think we're all in agreement. The program review occurs independent of site. And Chief Wilking, one of the things that you mentioned that I like the sound of is you're also evaluating what you have now versus what we either think we need or would like. So I think that'll be a good contrast to figure out how short we are currently in our existing facilities.
Yeah, and I would agree absolutely with that.
And from a political point of view, knowing how citizens hate spending money for studies, the more we can bring in the recommendations from the CPSM study, I think the happier people would be. Yeah.
No, I agree, Judy. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the stuff occurring is going to be informed by that. And Chief Wilking even said that, some of their operational strategies going forward will be shaped partially by that as well. So I guess we'll have to make sure the public is aware of that was a very fruitful study.
So what question would we be asking the consultant to pursue?
What questions would we be asking?
Yeah, Melissa had said, given these program requirements, do these sites offer what we need in terms of programming, and have the consultant go through each of the options and see what's the better fit? Is that, is that the type of question? And, what other questions would be part of the RFP?
I mean, I don't know if it's
questions.
I don't know if I necessarily call them questions, Judy. I guess this would be our direction that we would give to them. Like, we would give them the program, say, we need you to vet this program, tell us, what works, and is there anything additional that we need to add by way of code or just, a new way of doing things that we really want to incorporate in our police and fire departments. And then as far as, we will provide them with site options as well, and then it'll be up to them to take that program and to see how it fits in the site, and if it makes sense. How would you have to set a building up on that site? What are the access to it? What do we have for utilities going to it? Those are all things that we would have them evaluate. We can try to provide as much of that information up front as we can, but it'll be up to them to kind of roughly lay out how the building would work on the site. Does that make sense?
Yeah, those are questions in my mind.
Okay. To me, that's just like, this is what we're paying you to do.
Okay.
And then there's a dialectic the entire time they're doing this. We go back and forth with them. They tell us what we think, and we can give them the thumbs up or thumbs down if that's the right direction. So I think we've come to some agreement on the program review. It sounds like the town is doing a lot of work on that end already. Hopefully that will, Melissa, to your point, that could cut down a little bit on what a consultant would charge us if we can provide them with that information. It's not a huge step though, so I don't know if it's a huge cost savings at this point. So, and the site evaluation, the more we can do with that, the better. And like I said, I guess I envision a subsequent meeting to this where we start discussing sites. Where could this thing go? What are the different variations of renovation versus addition that we could do? So, that's something else we can do, and that helps a bit. And as far as doing anything like surveying or geotechnical evaluation, I'm not sure how we do that outside of having the consultant pay to do that. I don't know if we have any kind of money anywhere that we could tap to have something like that done. And then as we get into the feasibility study, let me see, Peter was the only one who did his homework for this class today. So kudos to Peter. So yeah, existing conditions, town staff, FAC, BRC. Yeah, that might be a legitimate one that we can pull off. We can provide a lot of information to a consultant on our current facility. So I think that's a pretty good one that we might be able to pull out and do on our own. As far as 3C goes, the feasibility study, renovations, additions, yeah, that's something that we can discuss internally and present to them as here's all the various options, the different sites, and the building combinations that we could put out there.
That sounds like really key discussions, that particular piece.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, we need a lot of people involved, not just like Dave and Melissa, but I don't know. So if we're entertaining land that we don't yet own or buildings that we don't yet own, I don't even know who to bring in for those discussions in terms of having an awareness of what might be a facility that we could acquire or a piece of land that we could acquire. I don't even know how we do that. Melissa, you've been at this job for a couple months now, so
Sure. So Dave and I and the chiefs did have a discussion, and you know, I believe you guys are all aware, but one of the main issues it is response time for the fire department. And so the discussion on keeping or I don't want to say keeping, but the discussion of the importance of a fire station in the downtown area, wherever that may be. And with that in mind, Dave did look in I think it was either a 1 mile or half mile sort of radius from the current fire station. And he looked for all plots of land or all land, parcels of land that were 2 acres, which was sort of the approximate size. And I apologize that I don't have all of the information, but I believe there were only, oh gosh, hold on 1 second. I think I might have it right here. If you guys can bear with me for 1 second, I can get that for you. Just 1 minute. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. So he said, I completed a GIS analysis of the area within a half a mile of the existing facility, and there are 658 parcels, with only 20 of those parcels 2 acres or larger, and all of them are already developed. Even if a parcel is available, the cost to purchase in the downtown could prove cost prohibitively expensive. At this point, it does not appear that this is a viable option due to the lack of liability. The more out of downtown you go, the more the response time for fire and EMS can be impacted. And so I think there does need to be a discussion on, from the study that came through, and Eric, I'm going to ask you to speak on this a little bit for the public to understand why it is important to keep at least a fire station in the downtown area. I know we talked about it. I think you explained it very well the other day.
Yeah, and to Judy's end, we all on the same page. We paid to have a study done, and one of the key points of that study, even before they started to make recommendations, was kind of a data analysis and review of what got us here, where we are. And one of the key points of that data analysis was the demand mapping of the town of Exeter, and it spoke volumes when that demand mapping came out and indicated that the area currently within 4 minutes of the 20 Court Street location protects about 80% of our current call volume, both fire and EMS. So using 4 minutes or 240 seconds as the national benchmark, our forefathers and mothers that thought of this facility really did a great job in understanding the demographics of the town and the urban infrastructure, and they kind of set it in a location that was not far off from what we need. That being said, 20% of the town lies outside the 4 minutes. And to Peter's argument, does that warrant the added expense for another station or not? That's what we're looking to have somebody help us with. But yeah, I know I spoke with both Judy and Bob Kelly at the time of our budget, and I said, as I transition from Chief Como, I personally cannot visualize a fire station outside of this downtown core and having it really serve the purpose of the town when you're already servicing 80% of the call volume. I won't say population, but I will say call volume. And so I think it's going to be hard to visualize someplace different than in this center core of town for a significant fire presence.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, is anybody aware of any school of thought that would not include the fire department downtown? I mean, are there people that are really...
I just look at one of the bullets under 1C, renovate for fire, renovate for PD, or if feasible, remove both. I'm not sure, and I'm not sure how viable, but if one of the options was to create a new fire headquarters and locate perhaps the entire public safety complex, let's just use, for argument's sake, the Continental Drive location. Although now the northern part of the town, 20% is serviced well, we've now abandoned 80% of the run volume of population. So just an example of even if a firm said it makes way good sense and from a dollar value it's the least expensive to co-locate, I think I would have to raise my hand and argue that we're not servicing the town anymore. We've moved too far out of the downtown area, but I'm certainly hoping that the firm we hire will be in tune with the community, because we're going to give them some great information and understand that's just not the position we want to be.
And Peter,
I would agree, Chief. Sorry, Melissa. Let me just really quickly address the Chief's. I wrote those words based on the CPMS study, and I frankly made a mistake because as I read C, at a minimum, there should be a D that says build a new one combined for both departments. But I personally am pretty skeptical about whether you can fit a new police station and a renovated fire station in just one building. So when I wrote C1C, if you will, it was only there to not dismiss that as an option. It was not in any way, none of these, by the way, were more than my attempt to extrapolate from the CPMS study. And I made a mistake in the extrapolation when I put the way I wrote C. C should read, put a new combined building somewhere. The way C reads now, you can do it as an option, but the CPMS study didn't put that in. It put a new building up somewhere. And that was a mistake on my part in writing C the way I did, even though I don't believe that's a viable option to put a new building somewhere. So, Chief, none of this, by the way, was arguing in favor of any particular location away from the downtown or, for the downtown. It was just to try to flesh out the options, which I think everybody has agreed during this discussion. We're going to have to spend more time on the chiefs, Melissa, the town staff, the budget committee, and the facilities committee to give those cases that we want the consultant to study.
No, fair enough. Understood.
Yeah, Melissa, did you have?
No, I was just saying, you're completely fine. Yep. This is one of the tricky parts about Zoom, right? So no, I was just saying that as we go through this process, I think one of the reasons we're talking about, should we move it outside of the downtown is we want the public to hear all of the options and why we want to talk about something or we don't, right? So Peter, you had said we want to make sure that we don't make any assumptions. And I do think that it is good for the public to hear, and they say, well, why don't you just pick this piece of property down so-and-so? And they can go back and listen to that. And so they're, it's just going through that process and making sure everyone understands and hears that there's a very valuable, important reason for keeping it in the downtown, if it's possible.
Yeah, Melissa and Chief Wilking, how much of the present facility, that location, is connected or is how much of the town parcel the current fire police station is on? And the rec facility are on. How much is of that would be up for consideration for options? Not to make this messier, but
You're jumping ahead, Judy.
Yeah, Judy, that's a good thought. Keep going on that way.
Do you mean where the rec building currently is, Judy?
Yes.
Okay.
You're kicking Melissa's old office? Yeah.
Are you kicking me out of my building without a new one, my dear? No, I'm just kidding.
The
Well, you might be, Melissa. You might be if the town decides that it wants to put the next police station on the 32 Court Street Senior Center envelope because they want the police station downtown. The town has to be asked whether or not they want to build a new building for the rec department at Hampton Road sooner rather than later. But I don't think, and Judy, I don't know if that's the way you were going. I think that's a perfect example of a location that the town already happens to own, that just because it's now being used for legitimate purpose A, it may well be a better use of that property for legitimate purpose B if B is higher priority.
Peter, I think
I don't know what the answer is, but it ought to be on the option list.
Peter, I think she was kidding. I think they would love that. I think a lot of people want that. I think it's a joke.
Even if they have to wait for a new building,
we'll talk about that.
That'd be great.
But So Judy, there is a piece of property in between the public safety building. It is a privately owned multi-family home. It's a private home. And then you come up to the 32 and 30 Court Street properties, which is about, I believe, and I apologize that I don't have this in front of me and memorized, I believe it's about 1.5 acres. And you do, yeah. but I have to double check that. And I can send that out. So yeah, there certainly is, I don't know how much that piece of property would be to purchase. It's a privately owned multi-family home. But there is definitely that possibility, I suppose. I think Peter is not wrong in that we need to look at all of the options. I don't know how feasible that would be. We would have to talk more about it and flush that out for certain.
Yeah, it sounds like everybody's chomping at the bit for the next meeting where we actually start to delve into potential options. So, I know you're all anxious to get there, but not tonight. And Chief, I just want to say one more thing to you. When you say, if you're concerned about a consultant kind of pushing us in a certain direction, just don't see that happening. We're the owner. We will tell the consultant what we're going to do. You are part of that ownership as well. So if there's something that affects, the first 2 words of this whole project are public safety. So if there's anything that negatively or adversely affects public safety, we just won't do it. So I just want you to feel empowered to say what you think is best for you, and also know that everybody in this process on the town side is squarely on your side as well to make sure we get the project we want. No consultant is going to push us in a particular direction. So
And
Can I
I
ask
thank you, Chris.
a related question? So
Yeah.
that little brief thing that you gave us, Chief Woking, about the pulled out of the study, and just of your knowledge, the 4 minutes and the 80%, that was beautifully said and so easy. Is there similar requirements like that for police? I saw you sitting forward.
I let Chief Poulin.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
That,
Yeah.
But I'm not aware of any.
Okay.
Well, no, because their patrol cars are out on the streets all the time. We had quite a discussion about this. Is Chief Pullen there?
Yeah,
I am.
trying to answer.
Oh, yeah, you can answer.
Well, that's exactly right, because our patrol cars are constantly driving around different areas of town, and we split them up into sectors that the response time isn't affected by where our headquarters is.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Not to waste a lot of time on it, but just to circle back, and Chris, thanks. I think it's going to be far more difficult to stay as neutral as possible with a needs or our programming without skewing a contractor into one thought of another. And I'll just use the example. I don't think anybody's going to recommend a building be built out of the downtown once they see the data, but it's going to be very hard to describe the current facility and situation and programming that we have, and then somehow describe what could happen if the current facility was only asked to support X. Half the staff, half the apparatus, where could the other half go? What would that look like, and what would that cost? So being fully respective of what you're looking for as the facility committee, and understanding Judy and Bob's concerns as budget committee reps, I think I'm going to have a far more difficult trying to stay as neutral and vanilla as possible with our programming without dragging somebody down the rabbit hole. So full disclosure, I'm going to put that out there, because we might be all collaborating together on this programming piece to make sure we're all in agreement what it needs to look like.
Now, Chief, I'm not sure I completely followed you there. Are you saying your programming is going to skew towards renovating the entire building at Court Street?
Well, let me give you an example. The CPSM study has publicly stated that they believe the town should have 7 firefighters on duty minimum, and find a way to budget 8 in the future. Well, this facility cannot support 8 people without significant renovations or additions, easily, or a newly constructed building. However, this facility could support the current 4 to 5 if 3 to 4 others were at a different location. So looking at the footprint of the building and what this building currently offers and how it was designed for 5 firefighters on duty back in 1978, if we return the mission of the building back to the original intent in the late 70s, early 80s, there's a good chance that significant renovations of the building may be unnecessary if we look at a different program model. And I'm just going to leave it at that today. And I think, we'll see how that all plays out from a cost and analysis. But I think every one of us on this call today wants an independent review, and have them tell us, are we thinking the right direction, or are we skewed?
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I don't think that will affect their thinking as much as you may think. I don't think that's going to be an issue. So I think that's okay if you spell it out like that. I wouldn't be thinking that way either. I guess my first thought would be, okay, what if we kick the police department out of the building? What type of renovation would be required to get the fire so that you could support your staff of 8 there on that particular site? So I think they'll go through all those exercises. It shouldn't color things too specifically. So we've got about 15 minutes left. So I think that section 3 is pretty self-explanatory. Let's jump through the rest of the exercise just so I mean, is this helpful so far to everyone? I think the discussion's been good, and hopefully, like Judy and the chiefs, hopefully you guys get a better idea of what this process looks like and what to expect. All right, I'll take the silence as yes.
Yes, Chris, I'm sorry.
Okay. That's right. No, I don't want to speak in jargon or industry specific language. I want you folks to understand what all this is. So as we get to step 4, in step 3, we identify a bunch of sites and all that. And that's going to be a subsequent meeting where we'll talk about that. And then as we have like 1 or 2 public meetings as we work through that with the consultant, we'll arrive at a preferred alternative and one that we've already had some public feedback on. And the preferred alternative will hopefully be a acceptable solution to a lot of problems, one of them being operational effectiveness, another one being project cost, that sort of thing. So hopefully it'll address most of what we need. There's no perfect design solution usually. I don't think we'll find something that's cheap but is awesome at the same time and supports growth for the next 50 years. But hopefully it'll be the best one that we can get, and hopefully will garner enough public support for passing. So 5 is part of that process as well, where we have community participation assistance. The independent cost estimate, like I said, architectural firms, they're not cost estimators. They might have a rough idea based on square foot, but I really want to make sure that out of our $100,000, Melissa, I think this is probably one of the most important things I want to make sure we cover, because we need that cost verification from a third party. Like I said, it won't be perfect, but it's something.
No, I agree.
Okay. And then the deliverables, like the main deliverable at the end of this will be the feasibility study with the preferred option. It looks, I think Rob came up with a lot of this originally. So the feasibility study, the final report, will have everything about the site. It'll have the program. It'll talk about the different options that we entertained and why we selected the preferred option. There's some stuff in here that Peter identified, which, yeah, I agree. That's something we can negotiate with the firm to either do for the preferred option, not necessarily for every option. Things like digital and presentation boards for when we have public meetings. We'll see how far we need to go with that. Design narratives by construction division. That might be a little more detailed than we need. Construction divisions is a topic I don't really want to get into too deeply. In construction, there's kind of an industry standard for how different parts of the building are divided up. So like division 4 might be masonry. So any type of brick or rock on the job falls under division 4. So the contractor, if it's a big enough job, there'll be a subcontractor for division 4 for all the masonry, things like that. So we don't need a design narrative for all the construction divisions. We just need enough of a design narrative at this phase to get a cost estimate. And a design narrative would be, okay, we're going to have a 2-story building with some brick, some metal panel siding, 30% windows. We're going to have this type of heating and air conditioning system, et cetera. So just enough information to give the cost estimator the detail that they need to make a semi-accurate cost estimate. So that's another area where we can try to be as lean as possible. And then that's about it. So I think through our discussions, I can probably go through and clean this up and shorten it and just kind of highlight what I think we can do versus what we need a consultant to do. And then, we can take a look at that final list at the next meeting when Dave and Mark and Rob are here. And then I think after that, we could probably move on to the much anticipated site and facility identification phase. So very exciting.
So Chris, I just want to
go ahead, Melissa.
Sorry, Peter.
No problem.
The design, are you saying design renderings? Because I just don't know that we'll get to that. I would imagine we're more option A is, like you said, some stone, some this, some windows. I don't know that we're going to actually have pictures out of this to be able to present. We more will have programming square footage. Am I understanding that wrong?
Yeah, no, you're not. I'm not. I think for each option, we might have a very rough floor plan. But yeah, I mean, there wouldn't be any exterior design done at that point. Maybe when we get to the preferred option, the architect could quickly do a massing model just to show what the preferred solution might look like, or at least where it might fit onto the preferred site. But yeah, I think this would be kind of a minimal effort in terms of doing any kind of high-end presentations. Is there anything else on that? Anyone had questions?
Yeah, Chris, I have one question.
Yeah.
One question about the independent cost estimate. When we started this drill, I guess I thought that the independent cost estimate will be done by the consultant, but I'm a little confused now when you said that the architect wouldn't have that capability, assuming that we hire an architect for this feasibility study. Are you suggesting that the independent cost estimate is going to be a separate statement of work within this statement of work that whoever gets the overall contract subcontracts out for?
No. What I anticipate is the architect firm hiring a cost estimating firm. And that can be one of the good aspects of the RFQ, because when we have them submit for an RFQ, we will also have them submit what cost estimating firm are you going to bring on board, and give us a bunch of examples of police and fire stations that they've done cost estimating for, references, and all that thing. So it's not the cleanest thing in the world in that they will get paid through the consultant, not directly from us. But we're still relying on them not being an architect and being a cost estimating firm to give us good information. Because architectural firms don't have that cost estimating within their four walls of their offices.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess that's about it. So that's the process that we would envision this going through. And like I said, I'll clean this up a little bit, but I think we've talked it through to a point where I'm comfortable with what we could have going forward. Once I clean it up, we'll take another hard look at it to see if we think we can get all of that within the $100,000. And I think if we do enough legwork on the town side, we should be able to get there. I hope. All right. So does that sound like a good plan, everyone? The next meeting, I don't know if you guys want to come back again, but we're starting to get to know everybody very well here. So, but yeah, the next meeting, if we want to go through the site identification, is that what you think the next step is?
That discussion, you mean?
Yes. Yeah, as far as coming up with ideas of where this would go and what building combinations would work, et cetera.
That's key.
And not honing in on one, but just coming up with a list of them. And then that's what we'll give to the consultant. And, some of us that do design and construction, we can weigh in on, if we know about the site of the building and all, we can weigh in on the feasibility of it, that sort of thing. So, I mean, we can have a pretty informed discussion on it at this stage, I believe. So if everybody's on board with that, we can do that at the next meeting. Does that sound good?
Great.
Okay.
Great.
All right. Well, we're just about done for the evening. Does anybody have any last thoughts or questions? I'm with Amanda. I'm very tired, and I'm ready to sign off. So with that, thank you, everyone. I thought this was a very fruitful discussion. A lot of great points brought up. Very helpful. We didn't get done everything I wanted, but we definitely moved the football down the field a little bit. So thank you very much. And
Move adjourn.
yeah, I second the movement to adjourn. So how do you move to adjourn, Amanda, or how do you vote?
Yes.